If you're jumping straight from walking into the gym to loading plates on the bar, you're making a critical systems error that is robbing you of strength and inviting injury. Most lifters think warming up is about getting loose or breaking a sweat, but your body operates like a complex system, and trying to run high performance tasks before properly initializing is a recipe for malfunction. I've learned from hard knocks, my own injuries and surgeries, and other bumps and bruises along the way, that it requires purpose and intentionality. If you skip the sequence or if you execute it in the wrong way, you're not just missing out on the gains, the reason that you're in the gym, but you're actually potentially holding your back and making it harder on your physiology, on your recovery. In systems engineering, we have something called the cold start problem. When you power on a computer from a completely shut down state, it's cold, right? It doesn't immediately operate at its full capability. If we think of your body as working the same way, I think it's a good analogy for this process from the time you walk into the gym to the time you lift. So when you walk into the gym, your musculoskeletal system and your nervous system, it's like they're powered down. It's like they have to have a cold start, right? Your muscles are at a very low temperature. Your joints don't have the synovial fluid circulating yet. Your nervous system isn't yet primed for rapid force production, the kind of power that we put into place when we lift weights. And your motor patterns are a little bit sluggish. They're a little bit dormant. And so if you load heavy weight onto this unprepared system, it again is like the analogy I just said, trying to launch a really demanding program on a computer that is still like trying to start up. Other extreme is I'm going to spend 20 or 30 minutes of my workout doing all the warm-ups. And this week I'm going to add in mobility, and then I'm going to add in breathing, and I'm going to add in dynamic stretching, right? And it's like, I have to do all this stuff. Think of it as having three distinct phases. So phase one is system power on. If we're going to use the computer analogy. This is the general warm-up. And if you're like me, who lives in the Northeast, I train over my garage where it's like 50 degrees in the winter. It is cold. I'm cold. My muscles are cold. And this is like 3 to 5 minutes at most of some sort of low intensity movement. Maybe you have a rower. Maybe you have an assault bike like I do. Maybe you have just walk around the gym. I don't want you to be running or sprinting at this point. Just keep it easy, light, and warm yourself up. Just move. The goal isn't to break a sweat or to exhaust yourself. Phase two is like the hardware check, right? So now you've warmed up. Now you got to make sure things are operating right. This is where you prep your movement. You do maybe some targeted stuff if needed. And what I mean by that is maybe some stretching or mobility work if you have, for example, limitation. Most people, especially the younger you are, and if you don't have a history of any issues, you don't need any stretching at all. The final phase is the application-specific loading. So if we're going to take the computer analogy, but that term applies to our body. This is where you perform the movement that you're going to train. And you start light and you gradually increase the load until you reach your working weight. And you do that by starting with a higher number of reps at a very light weight, and then jumping up in reasonable increments, higher weights, lower reps, taking a little bit of rest, but not too much, all the way until you're ready for the working sets. All right, let's address some of the biggest mistakes that I see with warm-ups. I think the biggest first mistake a lot of people have, and it comes from like the boot camp world, CrossFit F45 world, is the everything warm-up, right? Where you spend a lot of time with foam rolling, with dynamic stretches, with mobility on every single limb, maybe yoga positions. You're, activating muscles that are firing just fine on their own, right? I got to activate my glute muscles. That's actually overloading yourself. You're doing too much before, you're loading too many background tasks before launching the main application, to go back to the computer analogy, right? So that's the first mistake. Mistake number two is the other extreme, the nothing warm up. Go straight from the locker room to loading up, maybe not the full working weight, but you go like halfway there. You do a warm up and then you load up the max on the bar. And that's, again, like trying to run a graphics intensive game right after you turn on your computer, right? You gotta wait for everything to load up first. Mistake number three is, I'll say, the generic warm up. It's like, this is my warm up. I do it all the time, right? It's the same routine regardless of what you're training. And I would say that on a given day, based on what you're lifting, the warm-up's gonna have to conform to get you ready for that. So that's mistake number three. Mistake number four is another big one, and that is, I'll say, confusing warm-ups with therapy, right? Like, in other words, like physical therapy. If you need 20 minutes of mobility work just to get into a squat position, I think that's more of a movement problem that has to be addressed separately. The warm-up is a diagnostic tool. Okay, it is giving you real-time feedback about how your body, your system is functioning right now today. If your usual warm-up weights, like if you're going for that 405 deadlift, but the warm-up at 315 just feels really, really heavy for some reason, if your movement quality is off, right? Maybe you're just low on energy, you've been dieting, you didn't have enough sleep, the quality is off. If you have pain rather than the normal soreness or stiffness, right? Pain that wasn't there before, and you're like, what is this? Your body is talking to you right then and there. Like, that's a really good thing to listen, to listen to what's going on. And so one more thing comes to mind now that I think about it is the difference between soreness or delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS, and pain. Because I think some people confuse the two. Yes, I want you to warm up if you have soreness. Try warming up and seeing if you're good to go. But if it's an acute pain, a sharp pain, something that doesn't improve as you warm up, pain that gets worse as you're loading into the warm up, pains that sharp or radiating, pain that creates like instability or you're compensating for it because it just feels so weak. Again, it's telling you something, and that is the point at which you're able to make a decision and do something about it. Okay. Now, if you're trying to customize your warm up for different scenarios, I wanted to give you some options here because I know what your next question is, like, well, what if I work out in the morning? Well, what if I do this? So morning sessions usually require a little more warm up. That's just the fact of it. Your nervous system is sluggish, your joints are stiffer, your core temperature is lower, and you just may need to do a little bit extra, but not much, an extra couple minutes, right? An extra ramp up set, something like that. If you are older, right? Over 30, over 40, over 50, it's not really an age thing so much as a personal recovery thing. You might benefit from more conservative jumps between the warm-up weights. Your tissues may need, more gradual loading to reach the readiness versus when you were in your 20s, right? So, the synovial fluid, the joints, the connective tissue. But again, don't use that as an excuse to go with a 20-minute warm-up. I mentioned earlier at one point how our body is systemic, right? Things are connected. And I didn't want to forget to mention this, but when you're warming up, right? When you've got the movement patterns and you're priming your nervous system, there's a lot of communication going on, right? The muscles are an endocrine organ. That means hormones and signals involved, chemical signals. And so when you are ramping up those warm-ups, you're already starting to get one of the benefits that I've talked about before about lifting, which is muscles that release signaling molecules called myokines. And they help coordinate this response throughout your body. It is chemical messengers that are telling your body, get ready for what's about to come, because you're already kind of doing it, right? You're warming up, doing those patterns, but you're doing them light. The warm-up prepares your muscles and joints and whole body communication to optimize your performance when you're ready to go at it. So that's also why movement-specific warm-ups are so much more effective than just a general warm-up and then just jumping into the lift. Activate those neural pathways, right? And the signal cascades, all of that stuff we just talked about. So bottom line here, I think I covered everything I wanted to regarding warm-ups. Basically, the warm-up is an important thing. It's not just increasing your temperature and getting loose, right? It's getting ready and getting feedback and diagnostic. It's not breaking a sweat. It's, booting up that whole system so that you can hit it hard with the lift and do it safely and avoid injury. And the warm-up should be individualized just like your training program. It should be just like your goals. It should be intelligent like the approach you take with everything else in the gym. It is part of your training program. That's it.